This is Open Door with Vince Robinson. In-depth conversations with people who are making a difference in the lives of others here and around the world. Culture is at the heart of who you are. Know your culture, find yourself on Open Door with Vince Robinson.
Grand Dawn and Great Rising. Welcome to another edition of Open Door with Vince Robinson. My guest today is an artist who happens to have been raised in another part of the world and somehow ended up in Cleveland, Ohio. Her name is Carolina Borja. She's a multi-genre cellist, an Afro-Colombian folk singer, an educator and composer, and she's based here in Cleveland. She's gathered her eclectic experience from collaborations with folk, fusion, and world music bands, interdisciplinary groups of artists, dance companies, chamber music, ensembles, and orchestra. She has a master's degree in cello performance from Ohio University. She's been a Fulbright, Martin Luther King, and United States Department of State Scholar, among many other distinctions. And she's also the director and founder of the Afro-Colombian Strings Scholarship and the Tutti Musical Program. Welcome to Open Door, Miss Carolina Borja. Did I say it right?
Yes, thank you. Yes.
Okay, because I could have anglicized it and said Carolina Borgia, but I don't think you would have appreciated that.
No, I appreciate you. Yeah, making the effort to say it. Carolina Borja, yeah.
Absolutely. So unlike many of the people who I interview, you are not actually from Colombia. You told me that you were from Bogota, Colombia. So talk to us, first of all, about what it was like to grow up in South America in the country of Colombia.
Just trying. You mean like what was the difference between Colombia and the States?
Well, you can talk about the difference, but it's just a matter of talking about the experience, because growing up in Colombia is not the same as growing up in the United States. And I say that as a person who has traveled and grew up in a military family and actually lived outside of the country on the island of Okinawa, Japan, and also in the islands of the Philippines on the other side of the world. So, you know, it was different there, and I would imagine that it would be different in Colombia than it would be living in Cleveland.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I grew up in the capital, which is Bogota, and I grew up in a particular place in the city, very like quite privileged with lots of trees. That's kind of like one of the things that I really loved of the place I lived. I guess this is one of the differences. People in Colombia don't move much. So I lived my whole life until I came here almost in the same place. So I grew up in this, you will call it, it's just so different because there are so many different contexts. But this is near an important park that I would maybe compare with Central Park of New York.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like along of the city, because Bogota is a lot of concrete, lots of buildings. But where I grew up, I was blessed and privileged to have a lot of trees and nature. So I was almost all the time playing outside. That's what I remember. I was just playing outside constantly in this particular place that was kind of like a combination between the best way I can explain it is a combination between a gated community, but it's similar to what like the projects here. So it's a combination of those things. And I grew up there. What else can I share? My parents, both were educators. And when they were really young, then they kind of like pivoted after that. My mom became combination of a psychologist with an educator, and my dad became a civil engineer. And I grew up with my siblings in an apartment. That's another difference with here. People are used to living in houses. I grew up in a 3-bedroom apartment, and that was normal, totally normal. Yeah, I went to like school, kind of like the only difference that I would say with here is like I didn't walk to school. There was a bus that will pick me up and take me to school. And in Colombia, it's very common to wear uniforms. So we didn't have to like figure out an outfit for each day, but it was just uniform. And I went to the same school the whole time. That's another common thing that it's not like I go up to elementary and then I move on to another school. No, you stay usually in the same school unless something happens. And yeah, then I went to college after that. That was a little bit more convoluted quotes because of the cost. It was like I had to take few gaps in my studies just to make sure that my family was able to afford that. Like my family did a huge effort for me to go to college there. But yeah, I graduated with a bachelor's in cello performance. And that's kind of like the long story short.
Yes. So you went to Ohio University. Was that when you made it to the United States? Is that the place that you landed and somehow ended up in Cleveland? How did that go?
So when I was in college, I got into this leadership program, the Martin Luther King program. And this program was trying to train Afro-Colombian future leaders. And basically what the program did was they would teach us English. The idea was that we would become fluent in the language and that we'll come to the States and pursue graduate studies. So I went through the whole program. I was in the very pilot of the program. So I finished it. It was challenging too, but I finished it. And as part of the program, they would pair us with an advisor to try to navigate the process of graduate studies here. And within that process, she told me like, hey, the Fulbright Columbia is about to open the scholarships for this program was called Cultural Studies for Afro-descendant and Indigenous Communities. And I had to wait a year after I graduated from my bachelor's, and yeah, I applied, I did the whole process, and I got it. And in the application, I can't remember, I think we were supposed to try with 4 different colleges, and from what I could see over a screen, I chose Ohio University. I got accepted into Ohio University, and that's the program that I chose, which was a master's in cello performance pedagogy.
Mm. I'm curious.
That's how I ended there.
Okay, excuse the interruption, but as you're speaking, I'm just thinking about the challenge, and I'm assuming that you spoke Spanish exclusively when you came to America, and you had to learn English in order to pursue your studies. Is that what happened? I just want to get to how were you speaking English when you were in Colombia?
Yes. So not necessarily that I would speak in the streets, But the Martin Luther King program, the scholarship, allowed me to learn English, like just study a lot. So I studied honestly with all the studies. There was 1 year that I didn't do, that the Martin Luther King scholarship didn't pay, but I studied maybe 4 years of English before coming here. So I would speak in class, and I would do everything: listening, speaking, writing. What is the other one? The reading, everything. So when I came, I already spoke English, but more like a English school English. That's how I would put it. Because when I came, I was like petrified. I was like, I don't understand anything. I literally don't understand what they are saying. Because what I learned was this slow paced English. And when I came, there was a bunch of accents. People spoke really fast. So, yeah,
Yes.
that was the case. Yeah.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because as one growing up in schools, I took Spanish a few times. I took Spanish when I lived in Japan. And then when I went to college, I took Spanish again. And one of my frustrations with the language is that I understand it easier when I read it than when I speak it, because, people who speak Spanish sometimes can speak very fast. And you're translating as you're listening to the words come to you, and you don't pick up everything because you don't know all the words. And
Yeah.
I would assume that it would be the same thing for you as a Spanish speaker, listening to someone speak English and not being familiar with all of the words that they're speaking.
Yeah, especially one of the things that I remember, like I would try to navigate, and sometimes I would ask, like, can you repeat that? But I remember by 6 p.m., I could no longer hear any more English because I was so tired. So it was like taxing also, like it was energetically taxing for me to try to comprehend everything as an adult. It's different when you're a child. Children just adapt really quickly, but as an adult, that was a challenge.
Yes. Well, they say it's actually easier for young people to be multilingual than it is to learn a second language or a third language as you get up in age. Maybe not to the extent that you are, but to the extent that I am, because I know I have a few years on you. But that's really interesting. And I've always wondered about how that works for folks who come to a new country and may not necessarily be fluent in a specific language, and then also have to deal with the pressure of learning language. A lot of people who are here with that Eurocentric mindset, it's like, well, learn English, English is the end all be all and the only one. And, there's just so much power in words. So quite interesting. I'm glad you shared that. Let's get to the genesis of your relationship with music. When was it that Carolina decided, hey, I want to be a musician?
That's a good question. I think there was a series of situations. I feel like I've been like I'm an old soul of sorts. When I graduated from high school, I wanted to be a historian. That's what I wanted to do, but I didn't get into kind of like them. How do I explain this? There is this public universities in Colombia that are way cheaper and many times higher quality than private ones. So I wanted to get into this college. The major in history was fairly new in Colombia, and I didn't get in. So what happened back then, I don't know if it still happens, is that if you didn't get into college, you would go and study English and keep applying until you get in. Like you will give about like a year to try to get into the program that you wanted. And anyways, I didn't get in, and my dad was very into like, you gotta go to college. I don't know what you're gonna choose, but you gotta go to college. And I was like, okay, my dad is like, I'm annoyed and I just want him to stop telling me that. So I was already studying music. And I was like, let me just apply to a bunch of universities so that he sees that I'm applying and I'll figure it out at some point. So I do this process of applying to these universities that were really hard to get into. There was two that were public and one that was private. And I would see my friends and my colleagues saying like, I applied 3 times and I didn't get in. And it was just really hard to get in. It was very competitive, very few spots. And I applied to the 3 of them and I got into the 3 of them. I got accepted. And there were different things like, okay, I almost said like, this is almost crazy that I don't have as much experience as some of my friends. And I'm the one getting this spot. So that this has to mean something. And by the time I got accepted into the 3 programs, I was like, this means something. I'm not sure what it means, but okay, I'm going to do it. So my dad said, okay, just choose one of the 3, and I'll figure out how to pay for it. So I chose one, and I started studying. I had to stop again because of financial reasons, but I continued kind of like being immersed on the music world. Back then I was playing in orchestra. There was other things happening where I was like advancing really fast as a cellist. Kind of like contrary to what I was told, I was like just making progress faster. So by the time I got into like a pre-professional orchestra, I have only studied cello for like maybe 2 years. And that's when I was kind of in the gap of waiting to see if my family was going to be able to pay my studies. And that's when I say, yes, this is what I want to do. And that's when I made a commitment. I made a commitment to being a cellist.
I see. So there was something in you that said to you that you wanted to be a historian. Can you talk about what motivated you to do that, or was it a suggestion that your father made that you just followed through on?
Mm-hmm. No. I did wanted to be a historian. I wanted to be a historian because when I was in high school, I had these classes. One was called, I'm trying to remember all the names, but one was called economics. The other one was called politics. The other one was called history. And I was just fascinated by it. I just really liked everything about it. I like how it just helped me understand the world better. So yeah, it was my choice. I wanted to be a historian.
Mm.
Yeah.
So this is your opportunity to share with us some interesting things about the history of Colombia. I would have to imagine that, the perspective of history perhaps had Colombia at the center of it in relation to everything else that happened in other parts of the world, the same way the United States builds its history around, what happened here, the American Revolution and the Civil War and all that other kind of stuff. What interesting can you share with us about the history of Colombia that was so compelling that you decided that you wanted to be a historian?
The history of Colombia.
Or
Let me think. What was I thinking back then?
Yeah.
In terms of the history of Colombia,
or just history in general?
I think one of the things that definitely made like a question, because it was more of a question of like, why is this happening and keeps happening, was kind of like the waves of politicians and leaders that the country was going through and is still going through, just in a different way right now. I feel like there has been some evolution when I look back. But like I could understand why people wouldn't vote for a black president. For example, I was like, I don't understand. Like this guy is proposing, he has a really good program, and I just don't understand why he's not on the radar. So I guess that was one of the things. There was another dynamic that was interesting slash frustrating for me, and it was, I'm trying to remember. It had a historical name. I'm trying to remember it. It might come to me later, but it was this kind of like agreement that the two parties, so it was called the conservadores, the conservatives, and the liberals. So those were the two parties many years ago. And they made an agreement that they would take turns for the presidency. So, okay, you're going to do 4 years, then we're going to do 4 years, and they would just take turns. It wasn't about democracy at all. They had it all laid out. We're going to take turns, and this is how it's going to flow. So to me, that was like, wow, this is crazy. Those are two things that I remember that caught my attention in terms of becoming a historian.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's really interesting that you talk about this back and forth that they had between conservatives and liberals, because that's basically what you have going on in America.
Mm-hmm.
You have a two-party system, and they switch back and forth. And it just seems to me that because there's some disparity in their agendas, it's really kind of difficult to get any consistency, because, you go 4 years, you go 8 years, and then you start all over again. So the progress that you made gets erased. I think one of the things that we can use as a point of reference is just the whole funding of arts. During the during the Biden administration, you had the federal government, NEAs, Corporation for Public Broadcasting, all these situations that were set up for people to get benefit of funding to the arts. And then another administration comes in, and then they wipe it all out. And then, 4 years from now, maybe we'll be back to square one, and we'll have a Democratic presidency, and, maybe a House and a Senate that would support funding for the arts, even though it was taken away in the previous 4. So interesting. Right. Carolina, I want to talk to you about your encounters with racism. You lived outside of this country, and then you came to America, and you identify as an Afro-Colombian, which means that there's a certain part of your heritage that you connect with the continent of Africa. Can you share with us your perspective on the difference in the way racism is dealt with in Colombia than in America? What's been your personal experience with it?
Let's see. I have this conversation a lot, which I love. No problem. No shade. I think the first thing that comes to mind is the segregation. I never lived the segregation like I live it here.
So
it was. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, was it a more homogenous situation in Colombia where, your skin color really didn't matter as much to people as it does here?
It's not that. I think it was the way I would explain it, which is shifting right now in Colombia, is here, for example, if you're in Cleveland, is certain zip codes are zip codes for different skin colors. In Colombia, it's not quite like that. It's more geographical. Or when I was growing up, it was more geographical. So the majority of the Black people were in the coasts, like self-identify as Black. They were in the Pacific coast of Colombia. That's where my dad is from. So they started moving into the cities slowly when the war started, but many remain in these spaces. So it was like drops of Afro-Colombians throughout the country, but it wasn't like major migration. That's probably the best way I can explain it when I was growing up. So I definitely had encounters with racism, especially in classical music. Is an ongoing battle. I don't work anymore in the classical music realm. Either here or in Colombia is something that I'm just not interested in musically, but that was my training. So a lot of what I learned was in that space, and definitely like some of the behaviors that I had to deal with are not different from the behaviors that Black people have to deal with here. A lot of like, oh, you don't really know how to play this instrument. There's this almost like, because you're darker skin, like you really don't know how to do this and you will never get there. And people set all these obstacles for you. Sometimes they are conscious, sometimes they are unconscious. So they make it really hard for black like classical musicians to thrive. But I'm trying to think. I think one of the main differences is that, for example, I would get mainly racist acts from like people in power, and I say this talking about teachers or conductors or people that were like above me, quote unquote, but I wouldn't get it from my classmates necessarily. When I got here, it felt like it was everyone in a very, sometimes subtle. I'm trying to explain like the experience. It was like subtle maybe for them, but it was like, because it was everyone doing it at some level, it felt like huge for me. And of course, there will be the one person, the one teacher that would be like, she's really good. And, you know, it was maybe like, I remember in college, there was a couple of teachers that like, they got my back. Like, I felt like they got my back. But other than that, I just never felt embraced by either my classmates or the rest of the teachers. So there was a lot of rejection. I had to deal with a lot of rejection. Yeah.
Well, I think what you're describing just kind of mirrors the elitism that goes along with classical music. I mean, when you go to concerts at Severance Hall, you don't see many of us in the audience, and you don't see many of us on the stage.
Right. Yeah.
You know, so to hear you describe that racism that you were dealing with, someone being condescending to you because they don't think that you belong in the room with them, and they have doubts about your abilities or your capabilities. You know, it's just an example of the microaggressions that we experience here in this country. So I just thought it would be interesting to ask you about the difference between there and here. And I also heard you say that you kind of push back in terms of performing the classical music. So if you are a cantadora, then you're a traditional singer. And if you're singing traditional songs, then you're singing songs that have historical perspective because they've been passed down from generation to generation and they continue the history of the country through your music. So I guess what I'm wondering is, was that a choice that you were conscious of when you decided that you wanted to be a cantadora?
Oh, that's an excellent question. Hey, many things in my life have happened. Honestly, I think it's ancestral guidance, because many things I did not plan at all. So when I started playing cello, I was like, yeah, I'm going to play in an orchestra and that's going to be it. But just life started moving me throughout different paths. And after the Fulbright, I had to go back to Colombia for at least 2 years. That was kind of like the agreement that I will have to go there for at least 2 years to give back everything that I learned. And I ended up becoming a college teacher. And in this college, I met these amazing musicians, including this cantadora. And her name was Edna Guerrero. And they were looking for a cellist. So as I get in, the cellist was leaving the town or the city. And they're like, hey, they're looking for a cellist. Like, would you be interested? They play, I'm trying to think of the translation. It's like folk fusion. They call it in Latin America Iberoamericano. So it's everything that is Spain, Central America, the islands, and South America. So music from all those places. It was a combination of this music. And I was like, absolutely, yes. I already wanted to start. I've been wanting to play world music for a long time. So I end up joining this band. And they're like, okay, we're getting ready to go on tour. I was in another town called Barranquilla, which is in the Atlantic coast of Colombia. And they were like, okay, we're going to go to Bogota to get ready. I think we're getting ready to go to Argentina afterwards. And they say, we're going to learn this song and we're going to sing this song together. I was like, whoa, wait a second, I play cello. So I was still a lot in this mindset of like, I play cello and that's it. And they were like, no, everyone, it doesn't matter what you play in this group, everyone sings this song. I was like, I had a lot of resistance because I came from the classical realm where it's like, you have to train and you have to sing in a certain way or something like that. And I was like, I don't know how you do that. And I was like, come on, like you're Black and you got this. We're going to show you how you're going to find this voice. I was very nervous about it, but they showed me the mechanics and I did it. But behind the mechanics, I knew that I had like an ancestral background because my grandmother was a cantadora. So I didn't grow up with my paternal grandmother, but I do believe that those ancestral, how would I say, it's not even skills, it's like you're connected. So I did the song and I was still kind of like hesitant about it, but I did it. Then I moved to the States and I started working with Mama Fasi. And we had a group called Comilesa She. We started as a bunch of people. And then little by little, it was only 3 of us. And they were like, okay, we need a singer. And I was like, sure, yeah, like we need a singer. And they just looked at me and I was like, wait a second, like I'm a cellist. And they say, no, we know that you can sing. And I was like, okay, I'll show you what I can do next rehearsal. And so I showed them and they were like, that's it, that's the voice. So that's kind of when I was pushed to the front to start singing as a Afro-Colombian folklore singer. And yeah, I've been doing it. I'm not necessarily um, super active with it. I think part of me doesn't feel like I totally understand the culture behind it because I grew up in the capital and that was very far from these practices. So I didn't even, when I was a kid, I didn't even go there to see people doing it. Although I see it more commonly now because people have migrated a lot. But in this town where I also was working as a college teacher, I saw it, it was like proudly done, and everyone in the town was just proud about this type of singing that was somehow shared with the Pacific Coast, although a little bit different, I guess. There's a little bit of difference in styles. But yeah, that's how I I became this, and I use it from time to time. It's not something that I do like all the time singing, but yeah, I
Yes.
use it.
Well, I would say that it's your epigenetic connection with your grandmother that allows her to express through you. And I'm just going to
Hmm.
leave it there. You got the DNA, and the DNA
Yeah,
is DNAing. I
absolutely. Yeah,
I gotta
yeah.
ask
That.
gotta ask you another question though, and I probably
Hmm.
should have asked this question before I asked the previous question. What was
Hmm.
it that drew you to the cello?
Ooh, what was it? I'm trying to think.
Because you could have played so many other instruments. You could have been like some folks who start out with piano, or you could have,
Right.
taken the percussion route, and the piano is a percussion instrument, but you could have taken a percussion route. But for some reason, you landed on the cello.
Yeah, that was honestly again one of those ancestral guidance. But kind of like the practical answer for it is I've heard a cello with some of the music that my siblings used to bring to the house. I just really like the sound. I was like, oh, I like that instrument. But honestly, I had no idea what it was until I started seeing videos and I was like, oh, I like that instrument. And I particularly remember my brother brought this cello quartet CD playing kind of like rock is the best way I can explain it. I was like, whoa, you can do that with a cello? And of course, I was a teenager. I was like, wow, I need to learn how to do this. Um, and that's how I started playing. But when I go back and now that I'm an adult and I've gone through a bunch of things with the instrument, the way I explain it at a spiritual level is that I did not choose the cello chose me. That's the way I would
Yeah,
say it.
that makes a lot of sense. And I'm also wondering if your skills on the cello would lead you to perhaps playing a larger version of it that they call the double bass. Can you imagine yourself playing an instrument that large?
I did. I actually did. When I did my master's, I was supposed to pick a secondary instrument. And I was like, what would that be? I was like, I don't want to play piano because I unfortunately had a traumatic experience with piano during my undergrad. I did have to play some piano when I was there. And I was like, no piano for me. I am done. Um, and my cello teacher was like, well, I would suggest double bass because it's so similar to cello. You won't have to do a lot of relearning stuff. And I was like, okay. And I think I've already heard of Esperanza Spalding, and I was like, hey, yeah, I want to learn this instrument.
Yes.
So yeah, I studied 2 years of double bass when I did my master's. Yeah.
Okay. I was actually thinking of Esperanza as you were speaking earlier, so I'm glad you invoked her name. And she's just, she's a phenomenal musician, you know. And,
Yeah.
and I thought about her singing too, and I'm just imagining that your voice might be kind of like her voice. And she gets a lot of accolades for the way she sings as well as for the way she plays, but then she also translates her experience on the double bass to a bass guitar. Do you think that you could move your skill set over to a bass guitar as well?
I tried at some point because I had colleagues and friends that they play different instruments. So sometimes we're like, oh, let me play your instrument. I tried. I just couldn't. I mean, I was an undergrad when I tried. The weight of the instrument, I just couldn't deal with it. Like hanging it over me, I just couldn't do that. So I said, I mean, I understand it because they explain, yeah, you do this. This is how you play. Like this is like almost like a cello. And I was like, yeah, I understand it, but it's very uncomfortable for me to hold it.
Yeah.
So I didn't pursue that.
Okay. Well, you opened up another can of worms, and you said that you had a traumatic experience with the piano. And as a pianist, I'm living to find out what that experience was, if you don't mind sharing it.
Oof. So I don't think it has anything to do with the instrument itself. It's a beautiful instrument. But when I was in college, it was mandatory that you would learn piano. I'm trying to remember how many years. Like it was at least 3 years. And the things that they would ask us to learn were frankly useless. Because we would learn, like, for example, I would say, we were like, okay, if I'm going to be a cellist, most likely I'm going to become a cello teacher. So I would like to accompany my students. Can you teach me to do that? And they would be like, no, you got to learn the classical training. You have to play like a classical pianist. And it's like, I don't want to be a classical pianist. And that was the norm. That was like, you have to play like a classical pianist. You have to do it was very oppressive. Like there was no negotiation whatsoever on like what I want to do with the instrument. So like, you're going to do what we tell you to do. And you better give results or we're going to fail you.
That's tragic. Really tragic.
Yes. So yeah.
So let me ask this. Are you one of those musicians who has difficulty improvising and have to play what's on the sheet in front of you? Or are you one that hears music and plays music, you hear it in your head and you execute it that way?
Yeah, I'm an improviser. Yeah,
okay,
definitely. That's probably the most comfortable space for me, just improvising.
Okay.
Yeah, that has been at the beginning. Of course, I had to learn, how to play a scale and arpeggio in this particularly challenging instrument. But once I acquired those skills, I feel like improvisation came really naturally to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, it's funny because I know, and I think she might play cello. I know she plays chamber music and whatnot, but it was just puzzling to me, because perhaps it's because certain aspects of improvisation come naturally to me because, for instance, I can play the same 4-chord progression over and over again. Mm-hmm. But every time I play that chord progression, particularly in my left hand, I can play what I'm playing in my left hand different every time. Mm-hmm. And it's like I don't really have to think about it. It just happens. So it's just it's kind of amusing to me to hear folks who are musicians say that they can't improvise, but I mean, if you do think about it, you can just think, I can do this differently this time and do it differently intentionally, or you can just be so plugged into your instrument that it just happens, and it's a combination of what you hear and a combination of what you feel.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what happens to people that or musicians that feel that it's really hard to improvise is many times it's the conditioning of the schools that they went to, because it's a lot of, at least in my experience, what was drilled or they tried to drill into my head was that I had to play perfectly the exact notes that were written in the paper, and that I was not a composer, I was just a performer, and I had to follow what was in the paper. But it's like, for me, it was like, well, what's the point of learning this instrument if I cannot do whatever I want?
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah.
And it seems as though some of the folks who were involved in your past teaching you music put handcuffs on you and didn't really give you the liberty to be creative because they only saw you doing things one way, which brings me to your teaching style. Because you know what you know and you do what you do, how is it that you teach music in comparison to the way that it was taught to you?
Well, teaching has also evolved for me. So I'm not the same teacher I used to be. Let's say after I graduated from my undergrad, or after I graduated from my master's. I'm a completely different teacher. When I graduated from undergrad, I was mainly teaching with the Suzuki method, which is, you might have heard of it. It's kind of like a method that is kind of like set in stone, like this is the songs that you have to learn them in this progression and you have to memorize them. And I was convinced that that's how you did it. Then after I did my master's, I was more, because I was teaching more college students, I was more into the classical training, although I was open to what the students would ask me. Hey, I want to play this. We're going to play this. They will play traditional music from the area where we were living. And I was more open to allowing them to explore that. Then I think something that happened for me was I experienced a major injury in my right arm. That was almost 10 years ago. And that injury, I went to every specialist that you can think of. There was one that told me, I think this is the muscle that you injured, and this is what I think you should do. But that basically made it impossible for me to play with a bow. So that's when another journey started for me, where all these things that I thought were crumbled. And I had to start thinking about music and cello playing in a different way. It was almost like a death. Like that person died when I got that injury, and another person was born. So the way I teach these days is more in connection with what the student needs. So I usually check in with the students. What is it that is bringing them to cello? What they want to learn, what they want to do. I see myself more as I'm a guidance, I'm guiding them, but I'm also part of a circle. I am teaching them, but I'm learning from them as well all the time. And I am helping them find their own voice. I am not telling them this is how you do this, because there are many ways of playing the cello. The Eurocentric perception is that this is how you play cello. I don't think that. I think there are many ways in where you can play the cello. And my job as a teacher is help the student. What is their way of playing the cello
that best suits them? So I have to ask, did you ever recover from that injury to a point where you could use a bow again?
That's another interesting story. But how do I answer it? I would say yes and no. So I tried many things. At the beginning, I thought, I said, my career is over. I have to figure something out. But there were many people surrounding me that were like, no, you figure it out. You're going to keep doing this. And my guess is I will have to ask them. They saw something that I couldn't. But I tried to get help from colleagues. Hey, look at me. I'm having this problem. I'm not able to do this movement. And by the 7th year, I gave up. There was one movement that I could not do. And I was like, I give up. I'm tired. I've been just fighting with this for 7 years. I've been putting all my patience, trying as hard as I can, and it's still not working. So I kind of gave up and I stopped trying. I said, maybe that's the answer. I need to just stop trying. And I was talking to a colleague, and I told him, this is what is happening. I'm not able to use the bow for this. I'm only able to do this movement, but not this other movement. And he said, why don't you try this bow hold? I have a student that has your same complexion and is having the same issues that you used to have or that you're having. And I was like, oh. And again, one of those limiting beliefs, I was like, but that's not how you hold a cello bow. So I kind of didn't do anything with that information for a while. And then I was asked to work with a dance company here in Cleveland. And what they wanted me to do was more like a lyrical playing of the cello. And I was like, I got to figure it out because I really want to do this. I really wanted to work with them. And I remember my friend's advice. I was like, oh, I never tried that. Let me try it. So I did it. I hold the bow the way that he told me, and I start playing.
How beautiful. There's so much more that I want to talk to you about, but unfortunately, we've run out of time. But I just want to amplify the fact that you were involved in a project in the Transformative Art Fund, and I was happy to see you performing and getting paid for what you do, because it's just so necessary that we execute and we exercise our talents as artists, and the end result of it is the healing that takes place when we do what we do as artists. So I'd like to invite those who are hearing this interview right now to check in on Carolina and to witness her artistry as a singer and as a musician. Keep your eyes and ears open, and we'll put her social media contacts in the description of this podcast so that you will be able to connect with her at a future point in time. So at this point, I will thank you for joining me on Open Door today and look forward to another conversation. I've learned so much about you. So now that I know a certain part of your story, I'll have a completely different perspective when I see you in person again. So thank you for joining me today.
Gracias. Thank you, Danny.
De nada. And to those of you who are listening, we appreciate the fact that you tune in to Open Door with Vince Robinson on Mondays at 11 right here on 95.9 FM WOVU, Cleveland's urban alternative. Again, we appreciate your support and your patronage. You can also pick up this interview on my YouTube channel. When you get there, like, comment, subscribe, and hit that notification bell when you get there. As always, know yourself, love yourself, be yourself. Make today your best day. Peace.